Welcome to DC Statehood Today, the show that keeps you informed on the latest DC statehood issues. My name is Deneysha Reichard. You can watch us online at dctv.org or dc51.us. You can also follow us on Twitter at DC51Today. The DC statehood movement is seeing some progress. 2 DC statehood bills have been introduced in the U.S. Congress. H.R. 317, the bill in the House of Representatives introduced by D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, has 121 co-sponsors. The Senate equivalent, S.1688, was introduced by Senator Thomas Carper and has 18 co-sponsors. These bills aim to get Congress to admit D.C. as the 51st state in the Union. The bill calls for the larger residential part of D.C. to be the state of New Columbia, and a smaller part of D.C., made up of mainly federal buildings, including the White House, the U.S. Capitol, and museums, will remain the U.S. Capitol. Sanctuary cities are currently under attack. On July 21st, Texas Representative Louis Gohmert introduced the Safer D.C. Act, which requires D.C. police officers to cooperate with the Department of Homeland Security on immigration enforcement. The bill follows the death of a San Francisco woman who was allegedly killed by an undocumented immigrant. The bill would fine D.C. public officials who failed to report undocumented immigrants to federal agents up to $10,000. On July 30th, Delegate Eleanor Norton, Councilmember David Garcia, and other human rights groups introduced a statement denouncing the proposal of the bill. D.C. is one of 30 sanctuary cities across the U.S. Funding for D.C. TAG or the D.C. Tuition Assistance Grants will stay in place after a Senate hearing on July 23rd, allowing the $30 million funding for the program to continue. The program assists district high school students by providing up to $10,000 in tuition if they choose to attend state universities outside of D.C. Public officials have recently advocated for an increase in the D.C. TAG program in order to meet the demand of rising tuition costs nationwide. Earlier this year, Councilmember David Garcia introduced the Reproductive Health Non-Discrimination Act, which prohibits employers from discriminating against employees for their reproductive decision-making. Earlier this year, a resolution was introduced in U.S. Congress to reverse the bill, citing that the bill violates the religious rights of D.C. employers. Because the Senate did not sign the resolution on May 2nd, Councilmember Garcia's bill is now in effect, protecting employees in the district against retaliation from their employers based on their reproductive choices. A new Political Action Committee, or PAC, is now in the district. Not Your District PAC is committed to the District of Columbia's fundamental rights to self-governance. Founder Justin Robinson recently took the statehood movement to Phoenix, Arizona, as a speaker at Netroots, a progressive activist convention. Not Your District PAC has a GoFundMe page raising money to promote DC statehood. Currently, the page has raised $1,206 toward funding statehood efforts. A small delegation went to New York City to promote D.C. statehood. U.S. Shadow Representative Franklin Garcia attended the Dominican Day Parade in New York City. The 34-year-old parade celebrates Dominican American culture in the Big Apple. More than 300,000 people turned out to watch the parade. Recently, TV host John Oliver discussed D.C. statehood on his show Last Week Tonight, giving statehood a national platform during the segment. The TV host highlighted D.C.'s lack of budget autonomy and congressional voting rights. The segment also featured a statehood song with children. The song was later adopted in D.C. with local residents singing it in front of the U.S. Capitol. Local leaders in D.C. hope to take advantage of this exposure to spread the message of statehood nationwide. At-large Council member Vincent has a new initiative titled Statehood or Else. He aims to receive 1 million signatures in support of D.C. statehood. In our next segment, Theodora Brown will join Councilmember Orange to discuss his goal for the initiative.
Hello and welcome to DC Statehood Today. My name is Theodora Brown and I'm serving as your host today. We have a special guest in the studio today, Councilmember Vincent Orange, who is the at-large city council member for the District of Columbia. He used to be Ward 5 council member, so he used to be my council member. But welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So we want to start today about asking about your interest in the statehood movement.
Well, it's time for us to have D.C. statehood here in the nation's capital. And I've been involved in this issue ever since I got into town from California and ascertained that I had no representation in Congress. And I was having a discussion with my son, and we were talking about, taxation without representation. And he says, you mean I can't be a senator? I can't dream of being in the House of Representatives simply because I live in the District of Columbia? And I said, that's the way it is here in the nation's capital. And then I got involved with former Councilmember Kevin Chavis, who actually ran the D.C. Statehood Committee for the Council of the District of Columbia. Actually had my son testify there. And we've just been involved in this issue. It's just, it's just unfair. And now it's time to make a change. It's time for us to stand up.
So you recently introduced a resolution. Can you tell us about that resolution?
Yes, the resolution I introduced is statehood or else. And it's time for the District of Columbia, the citizens, to have our 2 senators and a person representing us in the House of Representatives that can vote. We need to be able to represent our citizens well. Right now it's taxation without representation. We pay more taxes than about 12 other states. Our population is larger than Vermont and Wyoming. Our citizens participate in all the wars and all the things that make this country great, yet we do not have full voting rights in Congress.
So tell us more about the Statehood or Else campaign that you propose in your resolution.
Well, the Statehood or Else campaign is designed to collect 1 million signatures, a minimum of 1 million signatures of support for D.C. statehood, and to gather those signatures and then deliver them to the President of the United States of America, President Barack Obama, and deliver them to all 535 members of Congress, as well as to travel to the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention next year in 2016 and present those signatures. We definitely want to make D.C. statehood now a part of the Democratic National Committee's platform. And so it's crucial to have these signatures, and we think we have a good plan to go out and start collecting the signatures.
So why 1 million signatures? What's the significance of that?
Well, it's a good number. When people hear a million, you kind of, come to attention. Now, we want a minimum of 1 million. We think in today's world, with all the technology, we can probably get more, but we want to have a threshold of at least 1 million signatures. And we'll start the process going to our ANCs, our advisory neighborhood commissioners. There's about 300 single-member districts. If we can get 1,000 signatures from each one of those single-member districts, that's 300,000. We'll work with the Federation of Civic and Citizen Associations. We'll work with the Democratic State Committee. We'll work with our shadow senators, Paul Strauss and Michael Brown, and with our representative, Franklin Garcia. And we just want to make sure that we get, D.C. residents involved early. And then from there, we'll get with the League of Women Voters. We'll get with the sororities and fraternities. We'll get with a number of the national organizations like the American Bar Association, the National Bar Association. I'm actually going out to Seattle, Washington this weekend for the National Conference of State Legislatures. Anita Bonds, who's chair of the D.C. Democratic State Committee, and myself, and I think a few other members will be introducing a resolution before the NCSL, calling for their support for statehood in the District of Columbia.
So what about the surrounding jurisdictions? What kind of support or interest are you getting from Maryland and Virginia and Delaware? Because they're really our neighbors, and so are you getting great support from them in terms of this initiative?
Well, right now we just introduced this legislation on July 14th, so we haven't gotten out to them yet. But the plan is to go across the nation. We want signatures from all 50 states, and we just want it from regular people, regular citizens, just saying that yes, we need to have representation in the District of Columbia. 660,000 residents without a true voice in Congress. it just doesn't sound well. It doesn't sit well. We're the free capital of the world, yet on our record, our capital, our citizens can't vote. The 82nd Attorney General of the United States of America, Eric Holder, he can be our Attorney General, but he cannot run for Senate in the District of Columbia, and he cannot be a member of the House of Representatives. There's rumors, a discussion, a dialogue that President Obama, when his term is complete, may stay in the District of Columbia, may become a resident. So that means if Michelle Obama decided that she wants to be in the Senate, she could not run as a citizen or a resident of the District of Columbia. But she could run for President of the United States. So it doesn't add up.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that we correct this. It's a blemish on our record. The United Nations Human Rights Committee says it's an injustice. The Organization of American States have said it's an injustice. And we can't go around policing the world when we have an injustice here in our own backyard.
Right, and I appreciate the that focus on the international organizations and certainly the national organizations as well. And so let's get back to the strategy for collecting the signatures, because you have to develop the petition first, and then you have to go out and collect signatures. And I get how we do that in D.C., but what kinds of things are you thinking about? What strategies are you thinking about employing to collect signatures outside of D.C.?
Well, we actually want major organizations and small organizations to kind of run their own little campaign and then provide us the signatures, and we'll compile them and present them. So if we can get the National Bar Association, American Bar Association to put on their websites and their digital platforms where people can actually sign up and submit their signatures, and we collect those, we'll become the clearinghouse. And making sure that we're able to deliver them to the Republican and Democratic national conventions next year. Also deliver them to the President of the United States, as well as to the 535 members of Congress. We'll have an opportunity to start collecting signatures at the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March. We'll also be collecting signatures on DC Emancipation Day. And in fact, this year, in 2016, the National Cherry Blossom Parade and DC Emancipation activities will occur on the same day, Saturday, April 16th. So the Cherry Blossom Parade attracts at least 1.5 million people. So we just need to be prepared to have people to collect those signatures, as well as we'll be accepting the signatures on digital platforms, through the websites, through the internet, and what have you.
Sure. So how do you plan to fund this initiative?
Well, initially, we feel that it won't take much just to get the petitions and get them out to what we're calling our low-hanging fruit here internally. But we plan to ask the council and ask the mayor of the District of Columbia to allocate some dollars so we can run this initiative. It's in everybody's benefit, and it's election year. We're going to be picking the next president of the United States, and we need to make sure that this is an item that's in the forefront, and that we put it on these platforms. We have a number of articulate presidential candidates, and we want to put this question to them, and we want to be able to say, these are the people that are behind us in this effort.
And so you mentioned the mayor and your colleagues on the city council. So how has it been, the resolution been received by them so far?
The resolution has been received very well. In fact, it was Councilmember Grasso, Councilmember Anita Bonds, and Councilmember Yvette Alexander that joined me in introducing the legislation. And then we picked up 5 co-sponsors. So we already have 9 council members on board right now. So we'll be looking to the chairman of the council, Phil Mendelson, to hold hearings. But this is a initiative that's going to move forward. We plan to get this done. And another significant thing that's going to occur next year is, because DC Emancipation Day is on Saturday, April 16th, by law we will celebrate it on tax day, April 15th. So that means that everyone in the nation will get 3 additional days to file their tax return, and they're going to be wondering, why do I get till April 18th? So we'll be able to tell that story, and we hope we'll build a national campaign. And the ideal is to get our mayor, who's off to a fresh start, who's being well received around the country, to be our spokesperson, along with the council, along with Representative Franklin Garcia, along with Senators Brown and Strauss.
Great. Well, that's great. And so we've come to the conclusion of our segment here, and I want to thank you, Councilmember Orange, for taking the time out and for the work that you're doing on behalf of D.C. Statehood.
Well, thank you so much.
Today we have a wonderful guest, Jerry Clark. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Mr. Clark is the political director for the D.C. Democracy and the chair of the D.C. Statehood Coalition. That sounds like a lot of activity that you're involved in. So tell us a little bit about the D.C. Statehood Coalition.
The D.C. Statehood Coalition actually is a relatively new organization. We got together in the early summer of 2012 because we had recognized that the national conventions were coming up and that it was very important that there'd be a presence at those conventions for D.C. statehood.
And so your organization is one of the primary organizations. What are the other organizations in the D.C. Statehood Coalition?
ACLU is one of our members, Stand Up for D.C. All of the shadow delegation is technically members. They are members of the coalition, and several other. The idea was to try to get everybody who was working on any aspect of statehood to get together and cooperate. And the convention was a great opportunity because no one really had the resources to do it alone.
Yes.
And we could only do it if we did it together.
So did you have success in that 2012
Oh, it was fantastic.
convention?
It was really fantastic. We had about 25 volunteers who paid their own way completely and fed themselves. We got some housing for people, free housing.
Yes.
But our major objective on the floor and then also at the daily meetings of state delegations was to get people to sign petitions supporting statehood. We were frankly overwhelmed with the positive response we got. We could have used 100 volunteers, but it was great. My favorite anecdote was I dropped off 2 volunteers at the morning breakfast meeting of the Texas delegation. I didn't think that the Texas delegation would be all that excited about D.C. statehood. Well, I was wrong. I had a call within a couple of minutes from volunteers to say, give us help. We can't handle all these people who want to sign up. Anyway, well, we took all those names and their contact information, et cetera, entered into our database, so that we are now able to call on them. Just very recently, for example, we were trying to get Senator McCaskill from Missouri to sign up as a co-sponsor of the Senate bill. And it was really through the efforts of the group that formed in the convention and others they brought in that made the difference.
So why don't you provide us with a brief overview of you mentioned the Senate bill, but isn't there a bill on the House side that has been introduced this year as well?
Is. The House bill, of course, was, and they're identical bills, was introduced by our own delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton. And we worked very hard during the previous session and during this one, and we now have a record number of members of the House, 121, which is about 2/3 of the Democrats in the House of Representatives who signed up. And then in the Senate side, we got a later start because the senator who introduced the bill in the Senate wanted to wait until he had a core group of people, and then he formally introduced it just, as I recall, just before the 4th of July.
Okay.
And I think we have 20-some members of the Senate signed already.
So what's next then?
Well, several things. One of them is we'll continue to doing that kind of lobbying, but we know that's not going to bring us to the level we need. It's good, it has to keep going, but you're not going to get a bill passed that way alone. So what we're doing is two other things primarily. Number one, we're organizing in the district so that, and doing the same thing, creating a database of supporters in the district so that when we want to have major rallies, we can get the word out to people so they come. We can't make it a one-time only thing. We got to have it be a continuous thing.
Right.
We might not get statehood for years. We got to keep working, building, have the momentum as long as it takes. And then in addition, we've got people working on every time a major group comes to Washington for a meeting, a national organization of any kind, we have people there to table and sign up more people, and then they go back to their hometowns and they become the core of still more
wonderful
local groups out there. So.
Well, it sounds like you're doing some great work, and I just want to thank you so much for coming to the show today, and we certainly would love to have you come back and tell us more about the work that you're doing on behalf of DC Statehood. Thank you so much, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, and I'd be glad to come back.
Great.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. Remember, you can watch us online at dctv.org or dc51.us, or follow us on Twitter at dc51today. I'm Deneysha Richard, and we hope to see you next time on DC Statehood Today.